Hi, everybody. Welcome to Dive Deep. I'm Shelby Cornett, and I'm the ministry assistant at Cambridge City Christian Church. And this is Danny.
What's up, Shelby?
Usual stuff.
The usual stuff. That sounds exciting. You really know how to make things sound exciting. The usual
Woohoo!
stuff. Yeah.
Office work. Woohoo!
Hey, but you're doing it for Jesus.
I am.
So I
Makes it-
expect a little more
That
excitement.
makes it better.
I expect a little more excitement.
I mean, I'm not going to do like a cheer, but
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, are you working hard to like be secretary of eternity for
Yeah.
Jesus, like the ministry assistant of, like, you know, they have student of the week or
Mhm.
office of the month
I'm
or
going to be
employee of
the
the month or whatever.
secretary of eternity.
Yeah, you'll be the secretary of eternity.
Well, I wore a prom dress at work today, so I don't know if
You might want to explain that to everybody watching, because that doesn't happen in most jobs.
the clothes closet is having Cinderella's closet,
Right.
where we give prom dresses to any girls who need prom
Mhm.
dresses. There were some that were really pretty, so
You just had to try them on.
I had to try them on.
Well,
I want to go back to prom.
I was studying in my office, so I
Danny
missed
was
out on
working
that.
hard.
Darn. I missed it.
I was walking the runway in the gym.
All right, well, darn, I missed that.
Yeah. So I got to make up for that to get Secretary of Eternity.
Okay. Well, hey, I'll tell you, in church work, one thing I've learned through the years is you never know what the day's going to bring you.
No,
It might-
that's true.
I mean, every day is different. It's not like some jobs that it's kind of the same thing every day. It's in the church. You don't know who's going to walk through the door. You don't know what's going to happen. You know,
I
that's one
stuck
of the
pieces of paper on a bunch of candy bars last week.
Yeah, that's not typical, right?
no.
Yeah.
I get to go
So.
shopping sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah. That's one of the things I do like about ministry work is that it's
It's
different.
I could not have one of those jobs where you sit at a desk and do the same thing every single day.
Mhm. Yeah, and I mean, and some people do enjoy that, and
Yeah.
they find comfort in
I need some
having
change.
the same thing every day, which is great. But yeah, I'm like that too. I'd like a little bit of mixing it up
Yeah.
every week. So, yeah. So, going to talk about the sermon Sunday, I
Yep.
guess? Or are we just going to talk about our...
I won't make you talk about prom dresses and
Okay.
candy bars anymore.
Okay. All right.
No, we'll talk about the sermon.
Yeah.
And this week was Family Matters.
Family Matters. Yeah.
Yep. But not the Urkel guy.
Not the Urkel Family Matters.
Yep.
No, we were in Mark chapter 10, so...
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we talked about
Marriage.
divorce.
Can I say marriage? You think everybody
What's that
watching will
from?
catch that? You don't remember?
I've heard people say it, but I don't know what it's from.
Marriage. The Princess Bride. You ever
No.
watch The Princess Bride? Boy, that's a part of you I did not want to know.
No.
I can't believe you've never watched The Princess
The
Bride.
princess movie?
It's called The Princess Bride.
Yeah.
It's not a princess movie.
So it's not a princess movie.
No, it's really it's like a fairy tale,
Uh-huh.
but it's fun, and
Okay.
it's like it's really good. You need to
I'm
watch it.
surprised that you've seen it.
But it's a fairy tale, but it's like not like a Disney fairy tale.
Okay.
Like it's
Okay.
yeah, it's maybe a little. I guess you could say it's more manly. It's a little more manly.
A manly fairy
It's a
tale?
manly fairy tale. Yeah, there
Okay.
you go. Yeah.
Called The Princess
So there,
Bride.
yeah, but you'll have to watch it
Okay.
to see what I mean.
Okay, I'll look it up.
You know, there's so many like lines in that movie that people quote. You know, I am.
Yeah, I've heard.
What is it? I am a Rigo.
Hello.
I
My
am.
name is Inigo Montoya.
And
Oh, I've heard
prepare-
that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You killed my father. Prepare to die. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
from that movie.
Okay.
Yeah. Mhm. But there's other lines in that movie too.
Yeah, I've heard the marriage thing.
Yeah, marriage is one of them.
He's only
Yeah.
mostly dead.
He's only mostly dead.
I've
yeah,
heard
there's
that, too.
there's a lot of lines in that movie. that
Okay, so
people
I just need
repeat.
to watch it so I
Yeah.
know what people are talking
So
about.
anyway, yeah, we were talking about marriage, right?
Yeah. Okay,
So
back to business.
yes.
We talked about marriage, divorce, and being children.
Yes. So that was
Right.
kind of this sermon this week. I kind of put two ideas here together.
Mhm.
One of the challenges, I think I've shared that on your podcast here, is that, as we kind of laid out the calendar for the year on this series,
Mhm.
it's been tricky at times to know, okay, what do we put together here? So I felt like this was a good connection that we're
Mhm.
talking about marriage, talking about children. The marriage part, Jesus focuses on mostly the idea of divorce. And when is divorce acceptable? And if you remember from the message, I talked about that there were two different lines of thought in Jesus' day. When he was confronted by the religious leaders, there were some who were from a school called Hillel and another one from Shammai. The school of Shammai was the more conservative. Hillel was a little bit more liberal. And so Hillel would say you could divorce pretty much for any reason you want, you know, if you don't get along or whatever. Shammai was like, well, it was closer to the biblical day of like sexual immorality. So they wanted to know where Jesus stood on this, and Jesus knew that. He knew that they were trying to draw him in to an argument that they were probably even having among themselves. 'Cause
Right.
my guess is there was probably people from both schools of thought that were in the crowd that day. So I'm sure that they were hoping to pull him in. And then what Jesus pretty much talks about is how God did allow divorce in the Old Testament, but it was only because of the hardened hearts of the people that wanted it. And there was a reason behind that. There was a lot of people, because they would just divorce for any reason, they would just go from spouse to spouse, you know.
Right.
And so God was trying to stop this, because if you look at the actual text, it says that you shouldn't, if you divorce, you shouldn't remarry. Well, what he's referring to is what was happening in that time when people would
Like a disposable nature
yes,
to it. Yeah.
Now, that's not to say that there aren't biblical reasons for it. The Bible does say, like I said, sexual immorality, specifically adultery, but Jesus actually went even further to point out certain other things that could happen within a marriage that could also lead to divorce. Things like homosexuality. Trying to think of some of the other things, spousal abuse, things like that. But nonetheless, yeah. I mean, it focused mostly on divorce, and really, it's a deeper issue of a person's heart. Like they weren't focused on commitment, and that was what we really talked the most about in the message, was the importance of commitment. And commitment's not easy; it's hard.
No, it's not.
But commitment is a promise. You know, God brings people together. We don't bring ourselves together. Our culture today tries to make it sound like, you know, I choose my love or my spouse or whatever. Well, no, God is the one that unites. So that's why we say what Jesus said, you know, what God has brought together, let no man separate. So nonetheless, if a person gets divorced, so let me ask you, Shelby, if a person gets divorced, are they sinning when they divorce?
Well, it's a sin, but it's forgivable.
Right. Yeah. And that's kind of the
Was
point.
that the right answer?
You got it. Yeah. I mean, that's the point of the whole thing is
I wrote at the end, stand by the truth and love.
Yes. And that was kind of the illustration I was pointing out with Shammai and Hillel, that sometimes what we tend to do is we camp out in one of these two areas. So, you know, Hillel says, oh, you could just go off and do whatever you want. Shammai's like super strict, you know, and what happens is if I'm in Shammai's camp, I can tend to be very judgmental and legalistic. And if I'm in Hillel's camp, I don't really believe in objective and absolute truth.
Right.
You can just kind of create
So there's
it
like
for
a
yourself.
gray area.
So really there isn't a gray area. What Jesus is saying, it's both. Like, we do need to stand in the truth, but we also need to have love. You know, we also need to be there to support when people are going through a divorce. And unfortunately, the church hasn't always been the best at that.
We can stand by the truth and not judge people at the same time.
Yes. Yeah. What we do is we teach what Jesus says, but we don't pronounce judgment, because only Jesus does that. Now, there is this idea today, and this is where I think you have the Shammai and Hillel thing going on. There are some people today, you've probably seen it, well, you shouldn't judge others. You shouldn't judge others. That's true, and it's not.
Right.
Like, I'm not going to judge a person's salvation. I'm not going to judge a person's relationship with God. But I should judge their character. Like, I should judge. I mean, Jesus isn't saying, well, because you shouldn't judge, you know, if somebody's going out and robbing banks, you shouldn't take that into account. You should still hang out with them. He's not saying that. You know, you still have to use wisdom in discerning a person's actions and their character, but you don't determine their relationship with God in their salvation. That's
Right.
something that God alone decides. So we look at what a person does, the content of their character, but we don't ostracize them because we have judged them to
Mhm.
be unworthy or going to hell or whatever it might be.
Right.
So that's where we make the mistake, though,
Mhm.
is we go into these camps. You know, there's one camp that says, oh, everybody's going to heaven. And then there's this camp, well, only who I think should go to heaven's going to
Mhm.
heaven. You know, so it's like, no, it comes back to Jesus.
Yeah.
right? What
Someone
is
much
Jesus?
higher than us
Yes.
is the one who makes that decision.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's pretty much the gist, you know, the central idea behind the message.
Mhm. What was the
this week.
children's part about?
So if you remember from the story, the children were coming to Jesus, and they were kind of being held back by the disciples because children were held in such low
Mhm.
regard in that period. We talked about this a couple weeks ago.
Yeah.
And what Jesus, it's a really cool image because he invites the children to him. He kind of scolds the disciples for holding them back from him. And, well, he doesn't scold. It's a very powerful word. You know, he's very upset with them.
Mhm.
They come to Jesus, and he kind of blesses them. And then he says, if you want to get into the kingdom of God, you got to be like these kids, which
Mhm.
was kind of like what Jesus did with the story of the Good Samaritan, because people didn't like Samaritans.
Yeah.
But when Jesus said they were good, they'd be like, well, in that time, they would have been like, I got to be like a kid. You know, I
Yeah.
don't want to be like a kid, you know. But Jesus like, no, because
Something about open hearts.
they're open hearts.
Empty-handed.
empty-handed. Yeah, we talked about that.
Mhm.
Empty-handed, and they're innocent, and yeah. So we need to be more like children.
Mhm.
And I love the image because it is very. It's like it's an illustration of how God cares for us. You know, we
Mhm.
come up on His lap and He blesses us. It's not us that.
We have nothing to offer.
Yeah, I mean, we don't like just plop up on His lap on our own. He has extended that invitation to us,
Mhm.
and He's blessed us through it. So it comes back to salvation. We find our salvation when we come with nothing, when we repent, when we admit that we're sinners, we have nothing to give to God, and that Jesus is all we need. That's
Mhm.
how we. So it's a really cool image,
Yeah.
beautiful image with the kids.
The
So,
Uncle Jesus thing again.
yeah,
Yeah.
sure, yep, cool,
That's all I had.
yeah.
What's this week?
So yeah, this week we continue the series. We're starting to get close. Our last
So, like,
sermon's on the
5 or
9th,
6
so we're
weeks?
about 5 or 6 more weeks left. Yeah, so this week we're going to talk about what does it look like to be successful?
Ooh.
Because everybody wants to be successful, but what is?
Stereotypical money and big house.
Well, that's interesting you say money, because the story we're going to look at has to do with a guy that had money. And then we're going to kind of look and see, okay, you know, when it comes to success, we've definitely got it mixed up. And so we're going to learn what Jesus says success looks like.
Yeah.
It's very different, I think, than what we think.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
All right.
that's what we'll focus on.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. So we'll see you next week. We'll continue the Mark series and talk about success.